Welcome to the Prairie State Wire Podcast. We're joined today by Jim Nowlan, and I'll tell you what, if I wanted to know what was going on inside Illinois politics, I think this is probably the guy I would want to go to. Jim has a very long history in Illinois public affairs. In fact, Jim, I'm going to ask you, walk us through briefly your background and history as someone who's been deeply involved and written about Illinois politics for quite some time.
I think I get the most chuckles out of Rotary clubs when I note that I've worked for 3 unindicted Illinois governors. And now you surround that with roles as a state legislator, state agency director, campaign manager for successful U.S. Senate candidate, unsuccessful presidential candidate. That goes back several decades for each of them. More recently, been a professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I write essays for the Chicago Tribune and have enjoyed the Prairie State, of which I have been a part for 84 years. So I do follow what goes on and be glad to try to give you a feel for what's going on in the Republican Party.
So when I hear Illinois, and I'm probably not alone in this, my first thought is, oh yeah, that's a blue state. And I don't mean to say that to write off the GOP's influence, but Illinois kind of has a reputation of, well, the blues are in control. But I think that many people, myself included, probably underestimate the GOP and its presence in Illinois. Could you speak to that? How powerful is the GOP? For that matter, how effective is the GOP? Then we can get into some of the things that you've observed over the time that you have worked with it in Illinois.
Sure. The GOP in Illinois is weaker than it needs to be or could be. I think we need to look at the demographic landscape and change over time. In 1970, and this comes from one of my books on Illinois politics, in 1970, minority groups represented 11% of the state population. Today, it's about 36, 37%. Within that, it's interesting to note that the white population of Illinois has decreased from 9.6 million to 7.8 million, almost 2 million fewer whites in the state than there were 50 some years ago. And probably a significant majority of those whites who left were Republican. And at the same time, the minorities coming in tended to be or to support the Democratic Party. It's as if we were welcoming folks from other countries and other parts of the country, of the nation, and sending whites to the South and Southwest generally. So a big change in who we are. And I don't mean to suggest anything other than the facts in those observations. So in Illinois, we have a metropolitan area of about 9 million people. And most of that metropolitan area is what we call the collar counties around Chicago, as well as suburban Cook, which embeds Chicago within it along the lakefront. And there's been a significant change in who these suburbanites are. When I was a youngster running for the state legislature back in 1966 and 68, I thought of the suburbs as lily white. Today, the suburban counties outside Cook and Chicago, the suburban counties, in those 6 suburban counties of 5 or so million people, a language other than English is spoken in 1/3 of the households.
Wow.
In other words, we've gone from lily white suburbs to quite diverse suburbs. And again, I'm just stating facts here. And so the Republican Party, which tends to have been conservative and white and Main Street business in its orientation, faces a different kind of constituency than it faced throughout the history of the state since Abraham Lincoln and his colleagues created the Republican Party back in the 1850s. It doesn't mean, and you suggested this at the outset, that the state is totally blue and that Republicans have no opportunities. The Republicans elected a governor in 2014, and so there is significant potential. I think the problem has been that the candidates at the top of the ticket for the Republican Party have been candidates unattractive, and I have to generalize, to the voters in the great Collar County region around Chicago. That is, in recent gubernatorial election, and maybe in the upcoming one, a candidate named Darren Bailey led the statewide ticket. And he is, I'm sure, a very fine gentleman from southeastern Illinois, strong Christian background. I think has created and operates a Christian school down in rural southeastern Illinois, which is closer to Oxford, Mississippi than it is to Chicago. And so it comes from a different culture, you might say. And so he has, and I predicted this when he ran the last time, he did well downstate, especially with his strong emphasis on social issues, such as being pro-life and a strong supporter of gun rights, issues that don't play so well in the suburbs. And as a result, he did well downstate and did very poorly in the suburbs and received an enthusiastic 42% of the statewide vote in the general election. He is one of several candidates seeking the gubernatorial nomination this coming spring. So let me talk, if I might, Bryan, about what makes a party and what makes it effective or not. And I'll start by talking about what is a political party, something we don't often stand back and think about. There are three elements of a political party: the party and organization, meaning the Illinois Republican State Central Committee, the county chairs, and those who fill some of the 10,000 precinct level positions for the party. Same thing for the Democrats in the structure of the party. The organization is created in order to get Republicans into government. That's the party in government. And that's the legislators and the statewide candidate or the statewide office holders. Because of extreme gerrymandering by the Democratic majorities in the legislature and the Democratic governor, the state legislature, the Republicans represent only a third of the state legislature and none of the statewide office holders. And that brings us to the third element of a party, and that's the party in the electorate, the party in people's heads. I am a Republican. I am a Democrat. I am an independent. Probably less than a third of Illinoisans consider themselves Republicans. Maybe a little more than a third consider themselves Democrat, and more than a third consider themselves independent. So this electorate actually offers an opportunity for Republicans if they can attract from that largest block being independent voters. And that's something, as I've suggested earlier, the Republican Party in recent elections has been unable to do. Back to the party and organization very briefly. The party and organization is to recruit candidates for office. It is to support the candidates, help them raise money. And the present Illinois Republican Party does not have the oomph, the structural substance to do any of those things because it has been weakened over recent years, and the lack of elected officials, as I've suggested, means that it's hard for the party to generate support even among Republican-leaning business leaders and others who feel they have to provide some support to the majority Democrats. I'm beginning to sound like a professor, so I maybe should stop there and see where you want to go with this.
Let me ask you this, Jim. When it comes to making some of the changes that need to take place within the party, to be able to put forth, the right candidates, that can be supported by some of those the more suburban areas, does the change need to start at the grassroots level, at the precinct level? Does it need to start at the top? How would that work?
I think you need strong, attractive candidates and money to promote the candidates. Illinois in the recent years has been hampered by the fact that the Democrat leader is J.B. Pritzker, whose recent wealth was noted at about $4 billion, and he has spent about $350 million of that in recent campaigns for himself and other candidates. He even spent $17 million in the last Republican gubernatorial primary by boasting that a certain candidate was too conservative. Well, that was attractive to many Republican primary voters, as was expected, and therefore the candidate nominated was maybe not the strongest candidate. But anyway, strong candidates and the money to promote them and a message. I don't think either of the two major parties have strong messages right now at the national and in this case, Illinois levels. And so why should voters support a Republican candidate? I'm a moderate Republican. I don't happen to be a supporter of Mr. Trump, but the Republican Party needs a message, and it doesn't have to be an issue-oriented message. Make America Great Again, a Reagan theme and picked up by Mr. Trump, is a brilliant message because it's positive, aspirational, and it doesn't offer any issues on which people can be for or against. It's a very positive thing. The New Deal of Franklin Roosevelt, Morning in America, another Reagan theme, aspirational, giving people something to believe the candidate was planning and hoping to achieve. So the party needs a message, it needs strong candidates, it needs money.
And, we are going to need a whole other interview to cover what you just kicked off, because that's a whole other topic worth exploring.
We go for our 20 minutes.
What can we lead out with? Actually, this is probably a good jumping off point for us. Again, we have been visiting with Jim Nowlan. Jim, for people who want to follow your work, you have an extensive body of writing, for instance, that they can follow. Where would you direct them to do that?
It needs updating, but my website, Jim Nowlan, Nowlan, it looks like Nowlan, jimnowlan.net, is up and running, but I've just told my research assistant we have scores of op-eds from the past couple of years we need to put onto it. But that will give people a feel for this crazy guy who has bounced around a long time.
Well, I appreciate your explanations, especially of political parties. You're right. That's something we don't think about often enough. We cuss them or cheer them, but we don't really think about what they do. But really, I'd like to do a rain check on the conversation of what is a kind of message that should be taken to the voters. And maybe that's something we can follow up on here in the near future.
Look forward to it.
All right. Again, thank you for joining us on the Prairie State Wire Podcast.